Hey guys, how you going? Campbell here from Autodidactic. Hope you're all having a spectacular day. And today I wanted to talk about some strange stories we're told about buildings that were built that really don't make a lot of sense. And there's quite a few of these, so I might make a few videos on it just to really get out the message that what we're being told about the past and about these big old world buildings being built all over the earth, it just doesn't make sense. And so today I wanted to jump into the Sydney International Exhibition that was held in Sydney, Australia in 1879. So let's get into it. And here we are on Wikipedia again. I use this because it gives us the mainstream narrative, the story that the mainstream are telling us and want us to believe, and we use this and then put it against the information we see in the world and see if they match up. And what we're finding is with a lot of these old world buildings, as I'm calling them, the buildings with the domes and the columns and the spires and everything else, the stories that we're given about them don't add up. So the Sydney International Exhibition, and it says, in late 1877, the Agricultural Society of New South Wales discussed the possibility of hosting an international exhibition in Sydney. Jules Joubert proposed importing the goods from the Universal Exposition in Paris in 1878 as a basis of the exhibition. On December 31, 1878, the Royal Commission for the Sydney International Exhibition was established, headed by Lord Augustus Loftus. A site of 35 acres on the high ground of the inner domain along Macquarie Street was chosen for the exhibition. James Johnson Barnett designed a massive building called the Garden Palace. The nave of the building measured 800 by 60 feet, and the transept ran for 500 feet. A large dome, 100 feet in diameter, rose 90 feet above the building, and the builder John Young finished the building in just 8 months, at a cost of £191,800. International response grew so rapidly that in June 1879 construction began on 2 large machinery halls and an art gallery. And this is the Garden Palace that was designed and built in just 8 months, and you can see the size of this thing. But luckily for us, we actually have plans. These are the plans, apparently, of the Garden Palace. And as you can see, this architect was so good that he designed this on unlevel ground. They didn't even level this ground off and put a proper foundation in. They didn't need to do it because the architect was so good. And as you can see, he's actually designed some doors and windows that actually go into the ground here. So yeah, he had quite vision, quite a lot of vision, this architect, to design such an amazing building that it's so big and so grand and it's not even flat. And here is another photo. As you can see, this is the exhibition crawling with people everywhere, and look at the size of that dome. So that's the dome. I believe that is the garden building. Here is another shot, and of course, it's up on a hill. Of course. Look at this obelisk, and just domes and antiquity everywhere. Look at the amount of spires, antenna coming off this top bit here. And of course we've got the 4 around the outside and the 1 in the middle. This is the ruins of the Garden Palace, they tell us. Yeah, not much left, just corrugated iron and yeah, not a lot left at all. And there we have the design again. And here it says, a reworking of London's Crystal Palace. The plan for the Garden Palace was similar to that of a large cathedral, having a long hall with lower aisles on either side, like a nave, and a transept of similar form, each terminating in towers and meeting beneath a central dome. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Sounds like a circuit of some kind. The successful contractor was John Young, a highly experienced building contractor who had worked on the Crystal Palace for the Great Exhibition in 1851 and locally on the General Post Office and exhibition building at Prince Alfred Park. The dome was 100 feet or 30.4 metres in diameter, 65.5 metres in height. The building was over 244 metres long and had a floor space of over 112,000 square metres, with 4.5 million feet of timber, 2.5 million bricks, and 243 tonnes of galvanised corrugated iron. The building was similar in many respects to the later Royal Exhibition building in Melbourne. Sydney's first hydraulic lift was contained in the Northern Tower, enabling visitors to climb the tower. What? Just said it was a lift. Why do they have to climb? The Garden Palace was sited on what is today the southwest end of the Royal Botanic Garden, although at the time it was built it was occupying land that was outside the garden. It was constructed primarily from timber, which ensured its complete destruction when engulfed by, that's right, fire.
Burn it.
In the early morning of 22nd September 1882, the Garden Palace at that time was used by a number of government departments and many significant records were destroyed by the fire. I'm sure they were. Notably records of squatting, occupation in New South Wales. Most importantly, however, 500 to 1,000 pieces of Sydney Aboriginal artefacts were lost in the fire. Isn't that interesting? So when they burnt this building down, they took out a lot of artefacts, which they're calling Aboriginal artefacts. They don't tell us what they were, of course. Could that have been tech, stuff from the old world? And of course, all this stuff about squatting, because this is all to do with, their law. They came in and took over the lands, and they probably called everyone else squatters, or maybe they were the squatters and they just burnt all the records and started again. Because this is, of course, what the World's Fairs were. They weren't really very fair. And this is the actual exhibition building. This is the front of it. And look at this. This, I haven't been able to find many photos inside, but this looks like a Ferris wheel. Like there could be, what we're told, a Ferris wheel inside there. Maybe that's some kind of engine. Just saying, don't know. Of course, it's got the round shape that we see everywhere that many of us are discussing, maybe for airships. And just look at the Antiquitech everywhere. Just all these bits popping off. Of course, we've got the domes. There'll be two at the back, no doubt. And in the front, we, of course, have a photo opportunity because that's what this is, right? Everyone's standing there posing. And, of course, we've got a couple of cannons for good measure. So what are cannons doing in Australia in 1879? We didn't have any wars. So who was making the cannons and why? And of course, look at the road, just gravel. This, of course, up on an uneven piece of land, because as we saw before, the whole thing was a mud flooder. Okay, so they tell us that the Garden Palace was built in 8 months, and what they say is because they had electricity that they could build into the night and through the night, and that's what helped them get it done so quickly. And this is just a site with some building times of some of the larger buildings that we see. Palace of Westminster, of course, 30 years. Of course, that thing is huge. The Parliamentary Building of Sri Lanka. Now this was built in 1979 to 1982. That took 3 years to build. Okay, and what we're looking at is this. So this took 3 years, but that huge garden palace only 8 months. This is in Bangladesh. I'm not even sure what this is. The Palace of Parliament in Romania. Okay, built again in the 80s. Now this took, 13 years to build this. In the 80s, with all the modern tech. Now granted, that one is probably, slightly larger than the garden palace, but not, it's not double the size or anything. And again, in modern times with all the modern tech, 13 years. Notice how this has a man-made front out here too. So questions about that. That clearly looks like an old royal building, or at the very least, the bottom of it. They may have put something on the top. Scottish Parliamentary Building. This, 5 years. And of course that's, what do you call it, modern architecture. But when you just look at the size of the buildings and stuff, that took 5 years. But they whacked up the garden palace in 8 months. This is the Reichstag. This is an inside view. But the Reichstags are actually, pretty similar size to the garden palace. If we just go, we'll do a search, get some images, and there it is there. So you can see it's a fairly similar size, kind of building. Okay, now that took 10 years. And that was, around the same time frame. But of course, this was in Germany. This is in Europe. Now, in Europe, they already had established, industry and mines and things. They didn't have that in Australia. Again, less than 100 years old. Parliamentary House, Finland, in the 1920s. That took 6 years. So all these stories we're told about building, time frames doesn't make sense. This, they say it was built in the 30s, but again, they've built it as a mud flutter and it's not on level ground. But again, they're saying 4 years. And that again is probably comparable in size to the Garden Palace. This, Tennessee Capitol, what have we got there? 14 years. And there, 1 year because that was China. Communists built faster. But that again was in the 50s. So that's the question, is this, what we're showing here is Garden Palace, 8 months. 8 months to build that. And again, they say that this was mostly built of wood. Does this look like wood to you? This is supposed to be the ruins of it. And again, does this look like wood or brick? Because I'm pretty sure that looks like masonry. And of course we get bits of, stuff around the ground. It looks like they've even put a piece of wood there. And no doubt there was wood in it. But they tell us that when it was being built, the whole roof was iron. And so what, they're using a wooden frame to hold up a massive iron roof? That, of course, again, doesn't make a lot of sense. So it says here 4.5 million feet of timber, 2.5 million bricks. So, okay, so it had a lot of brick. And 43 tons of galvanized corrugated iron. So that was on the roof, 243 tons held up by timber and brick. But then it says it burnt down. It was constructed primarily from timber. 4.5 million feet of timber, 2.5 million bricks. I mean, I guess that's primarily, but, it's not a wooden structure, is it? So again, this is the same old story. They build these things, they whack them up in no time, and then they burn down, and they're gone. And, I was raised in Australia. I went through the Australian school system. I was never, ever taught about any kind of exhibition in Australia. And they were in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Hobart, Brisbane, and even in Western Australia. Not in Perth, but I found one in Coolgardie, which is literally in the middle of the desert. So I'm going to hit that on a future video too, just to show you, because that one is really silly, because it's literally in the middle of the desert. There's nothing there, and they just built this huge building. So this is, the question, guys, is, is this story true? Is it even possible to build this in 8 months? I mean, look at the size of this thing. It's not a small building. It's massive. Okay, it's absolutely massive. Here you can see the size. I mean, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 stories there. Look at this obelisk. No explanation for that. And when we see the people, you can see that this is a really huge building. Look at that. And of course there's nothing around, just these huge buildings. And this is just before it burnt down. And of course it's another photo opportunity, isn't it? Always is. So there you go, just a quick video just to point out that all these stories we're told about these buildings being whacked up doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I hope you enjoyed that one. As always, a thank you to everyone who supports this channel, to all my Patreons, PayPal supporters, and people who buy my merch. And if you would like to support my work, there are links in the description. And so thanks for spending some time with me. Have a spectacular day, and I'll talk to you on the next upload. Bye for now.